Buckle up, folks, because this deep dive is going to be a wild one. We're heading straight into the heart of Turkish politics. And let me tell you, it's like something straight out of House of Cards.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about President Erdogan trying to pull off a real power move, aiming for a third term. But there's just one tiny problem.
Yeah.
The Turkish constitution's like, hold up, buddy, 2 terms and you're out of here. So what happens when a president with a thirst for power clashes head-on with the law of the land?
Well, that's exactly what makes this situation so fascinating, right? I mean, we're not just talking about a political chess match here. We're potentially looking at a full-blown constitutional crisis, and that's something you don't see every day.
So break it down for us. Is it really 2 terms and you're done? No exceptions, no loopholes?
Well, there is a twist, right? The Constitution, it does have this little clause, a kind of get out of jail, a free card, you could say.
Uh-huh.
It says a president can technically run for a third term if, and it's a big IF, early elections are called during their second term.
So Erdogan's thinking he could just snap his fingers and call for a snap election to get around this whole 2-term limit. Like, let's just reset the clock, shall we?
He could try, but it's a risky move, a real gamble. For early elections to happen, he needs a supermajority in parliament. We're talking 60% of the votes. And let's be real, Erdogan's party, the AKP and their coalition buddies, they just don't have those kind of numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say, that doesn't sound very likely.
Exactly. They need the opposition to play along. And frankly, the chances of that happening are about as slim as winning the lottery with a ticket you found on the street.
Wait a minute. Wouldn't the opposition be all over this? I mean, this is their chance to kick Erdogan out, right?
Yeah.
Would they jump at that opportunity?
Well, that's the dilemma, right? They might see this as their golden opportunity to strike while the iron's hot, especially if they think they've got a real shot at winning.
I see.
But it's a high-stakes game. What if they underestimate Erdogan's popularity? An early election could backfire spectacularly, and it could actually end up solidifying his grip on power, making him even stronger.
So early elections are off the table, or at least a long shot. What else could Erdogan pull out of his political playbook?
Okay, picture this. He could try to rewrite the rules of the game completely. I'm talking about a constitutional amendment, right? Just abolish the 2-term limit altogether. Poof, problem solved.
Whoa, that's a power move if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
That's some Machiavelli-level stuff right there. Can he actually get away with that, though?
Let's just say it's a tough climb, a real uphill battle.
Okay.
To amend the Constitution, he needs one of 2 things. Either a supermajority in Parliament that's a whopping 400 votes, which, as we've established, he doesn't have OR, he could go the referendum route. But even that ain't a cakewalk. That requires 360 votes and then has to win over the public in a popular vote.
So he's facing some serious pushback on this one.
Absolutely, both inside and outside the government. People see it as a blatant power grab, and they're not too keen on letting him just rewrite the rules to suit his own ambitions.
So let me recap. We've got early elections, probably not going to happen, and a constitutional amendment, which is facing major resistance.
Yeah.
It's like he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Is there a secret weapon he's got tucked away somewhere, or is this game over?
Well, there is one more card he might try to play, but it's a real wild card, a controversial one. Some of Erdogan's advisors have been floating this idea of getting the Constitution reinterpreted, wait for it, by the judiciary.
Now, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like asking a referee to change the rules of the game in the middle of the match?
That's a great analogy because that's exactly what it is.
Right.
It immediately raised serious concerns about whether the judiciary is truly independent or just another tool in Erdogan's political arsenal.
It kind of makes you wonder, are the courts dispensing justice or just doing the president's bidding?
Exactly. And the optics of this whole thing would be terrible. It wouldn't just be bending the rules, it'd be breaking them wide open.
Okay, so to sum it up, Erdogan's on a quest for a third term, but he's got 3 pretty tough paths ahead of him. Early elections, not looking good.
Right.
A constitutional amendment, facing a wall of opposition. And then there's this whole judicial reinterpretation thing, which just screams power grab. It's a high-stakes poker game, and it seems like Erdogan's not afraid to go all in. But what's driving him? Why is he so desperate to hang on to power?
Well, from what we've been seeing and hearing, Erdogan seems to genuinely believe that he's the only one who can steer Turkey through these turbulent times. He's all about continuity, seeing his grand vision through, maintaining stability, at least according to him.
So it's not just about power for power's sake. He actually thinks he's the best man for the job, the indispensable leader. But it's not just about what Erdogan wants, right? To stay in the game, he's got to convince the Turkish people that he deserves another 5 years at the helm. How's he planning to do that?
Think of it as a 3-pronged attack, a carefully crafted strategy. First, he's showing off all the shiny new infrastructure projects his government has delivered. Have you heard about that massive new airport they built in Istanbul? It's like a futuristic megacity of its own.
Oh, yeah, the Istanbul airport. It's all over the news. And then there's that ambitious Istanbul Canal project, the one that's supposed to rival the Suez Canal.
Exactly. That's the one.
It's certainly making waves, not all of them positive, especially with all the environmental concerns people are raising. It seems like a massive gamble with a pretty hefty price tag.
True, but it allows Erdogan to play the look what I've accomplished card, pointing to these tangible achievements and saying, this is what I've done for you. More of the same if you stick with me.
It's a bold strategy for sure. Big projects, big promises. But surely there's more to his campaign than just concrete and steel.
You bet. The second pillar of Erdogan's strategy is all about projecting strength on the world stage, flexing those geopolitical muscles. He's taken a hard line, diving headfirst into conflicts in the Eastern Mediterranean, Syria, the Caucasus. It's a message of power and assertiveness, showing the world that Turkey's a force to be reckoned with.
So he's playing the tough guy, the protector of Turkish interests, standing up to the big powers, not backing down from a fight. But isn't this approach kind of alienating Turkey from its allies in the West? It seems like a risky long-term play.
That's a valid point. Some argue that it's pushing Turkey further away from its traditional partners, isolating it on the world stage. But it resonates with a certain segment of the population, the voters who crave a strong leader, one who doesn't shy away from confrontation, who puts Turkey's interests first, no matter the cost.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure. So we've got the big infrastructure projects and the tough guy foreign policy. What's the third piece of this puzzle, the final card up Erdogan's sleeve?
This one's all about tapping into those deep-seated emotions, play into the heartstrings. Think of it as the populist appeal, the man of the people image. Erdogan's got this knack for connecting with conservative and nationalist voters, presenting himself as the champion of Turkish sovereignty, the defender of Islamic values. He often frames the opposition as out of touch with the everyday struggles of ordinary Turks, even accusing them of being puppets of foreign powers, working against Turkey's interests.
It's a powerful narrative, especially in a country grappling with its identity and place in the world. He's basically saying, I understand you, I'm one of you, and I'm the only one who can truly protect you from the forces that want to undermine our nation.
Exactly. He's tapping into those deep-seated anxieties and aspirations, rallying a loyal base who see him as the guardian of their values, their way of life.
Okay, so on the surface, it looks like Erdogan's got a pretty solid game plan. Flashy projects, a strongman persona, and a populist message that really seems to resonate with a big chunk of the electorate. But let's be real. Is it all smooth sailing? Or are there some cracks starting to show beneath the surface?
Well, nothing's ever that simple in politics, right?
Yeah.
Behind this facade of strength, there are some rumblings of trouble, and they're centered on an issue that hits everyone where it hurts the economy.
Ah, yes, the economy. We're just getting to that. Let's face it, things aren't looking too rosy in Turkey these days. Inflation's through the roof, the Turkish lira is taking a nosedive, and people are feeling the pinch. We're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here. This is about real people struggling to make ends meet.
You hit the nail on the head. The economic situation is a major vulnerability for Erdogan, no matter how many impressive bridges and airports he builds.
It's like, you can build all the fancy infrastructure you want, but if people can't afford to put food on the table, they're going to start asking some tough questions.
Exactly. And those questions are already being asked. Inflation's over 50%, which means the cost of living is skyrocketing. People are watching their purchasing power disappear, their savings dwindle away.
That's got to be putting a dent in Erdogan's popularity, even among his most loyal supporters.
It's definitely causing some anxiety, even among those who've stood by him through thick and thin. And it's not just the overall economic picture that's given him headaches. There are whispers of discontent, rumblings of dissatisfaction, even within his own party, the AKP.
Whoa! Hold up. Dissatisfaction within the AKP? I thought they were his ride-or-die crew. Tell me more about that.
Well, there's this growing sense that Erdogan's concentrated too much power in his own hands, that he's not really listening to dissenting voices within the party ranks. Some folks in the AKP are getting a little uneasy about the direction he's taken the country.
So it's not just the opposition he has to worry about now. He might have a mutiny brewing on his own ship. This is getting more and more like an episode of House of Cards every minute.
It certainly adds another layer of complexity to this whole political drama. And you can bet the opposition is watching this internal struggle very closely, looking for any opportunity to exploit those cracks in Erdogan's armor. Yeah, they're like sharks circling, waiting for a sign of weakness.
So they smell blood in the water.
Yeah.
What's their plan, though? How do you take down a political titan like Erdogan? It's not like they can just snap their fingers and make him disappear.
Well, they're not pulling any punches. They're going straight for the jugular, focusing on the one issue that really hits home for most voters, the economy.
Ah, yes. The economy, always a hot-button issue.
You got it. They're hammering Erdogan relentlessly on the high inflation, the rising cost of living, the growing gap between the rich and the poor. It's a classic strategy, right? Target the incumbent's weak spot, the thing that's causing the most pain.
It makes sense. If people are struggling to put food on the table, keep a roof over their heads, they're going to be looking for change, even if it means taking a chance on someone new. But is the economy really Erdogan's Achilles' heel? I mean, he's weathered some pretty tough economic storms in the past and come out on top.
That's true, but this time feels different, doesn't it? The economic pain is more widespread, more people are feeling it, and there's this sense that things are spinning out of control.
So you're saying that even Erdogan's most loyal supporters might be starting to have second thoughts.
There are definitely cracks appearing in that facade of invincibility. The opposition's hoping to capitalize on this discontent, presenting themselves as a viable alternative, a beacon of hope in these uncertain times.
It's not enough to just criticize, though, right? They have to offer a convincing alternative, a vision for a better future, something that people can really get behind.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. Their big play here is unity. They've formed this broad coalition, they call it the Nation Alliance, bringing together parties from across the political spectrum.
Seriously. We're talking about parties that usually wouldn't be caught dead in the same room together.
You got it. It's a real mix. You've got the secularist Republican People's Party, or CHP, teaming up with the Nationalist Good Party, and even the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, or HDP.
Wow, that's a pretty diverse group, to say the least. You gotta wonder, though, are they really united, or is this just a marriage of convenience? Can they really put aside their differences and work together?
It's a good question, and only time will tell. But for now, at least, they're presenting a united front. Their message is clear. We're putting aside our differences to save Turkey.
That's a powerful message, for sure. But is it enough to win over voters?
Well, besides the unity thing, they're also making some pretty concrete promises. One of their big pledges is to roll back those constitutional changes that Erdogan pushed through a few years back, the ones that basically gave him super presidential powers.
Ah, yes. Those changes. The ones that kind of tilted the balance of power way too far in favor of the president, right?
Exactly. The opposition's arguing that those changes eroded the checks and balances that are essential for a healthy democracy. They're promising to restore a more parliamentary system where the parliament has a stronger voice, where power isn't concentrated in the hands of one person.
So it's not just about getting rid of Erdogan, they're talking about changing the system itself.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bold move, but is it realistic? Can they really undo what Erdogan's done?
It'd be a huge undertaking, no doubt about it. It'd face some serious resistance from Erdogan and his supporters, but it's a key part of their platform, a way to appeal to voters who are concerned about the erosion of democracy in Turkey, who want to see power more evenly distributed.
So they're not just offering a change of leadership, they're offering a change of direction for Turkey. But even with this united front and a compelling message, there've got to be some hurdles they need to overcome, right? No team's perfect.
Right.
Every political alliance has its weaknesses.
You're absolutely right. One potential problem is the leadership question. The Nation Alliance hasn't yet agreed on a single candidate to run against Erdogan, and there are some pretty big egos in the mix, each with their own ambitions.
Oh, yeah. I can see where this is going. You've got the mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem Imamoglu, who's become a real rock star since he defeated Erdogan's candidate a few years back.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mansur Yavaş, the mayor of Ankara, who's also incredibly popular for his no-nonsense style and his focus on good governance. If those two decide to duke it out for the top spot, it could get messy.
No doubt about it. It could split the opposition, undermine their message of unity, and give Erdogan the opening he needs to exploit their divisions.
It's the age-old problem for political alliances. How do you stay united when everyone wants to be the leader?
It's a tough balancing act, for sure. And it's not just internal rivalries they have to worry about. There's also the whole issue of the HDP, the pro-Kurdish party.
Right, the HDP. They're a key part of this nation alliance, but their involvement is a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Exactly. They bring a lot of votes to the table, especially in the Kurdish majority southeast, but their presence makes some nationalist voters uneasy.
There's a long and complicated history between Turks and Kurds, and some voters might be hesitant to support a coalition that includes the HDP, seeing it as a concession too far.
It's a tricky situation, and Erdogan's a master at exploiting these kinds of divisions. He could easily paint the nation alliance as being in cahoots with Kurdish separatists, playing on those nationalist feels to rally his base.
It seems like every move the opposition makes, Erdogan's there, waiting to counter it, using their strengths against them. It's like a never-ending game of political chess.
That's a good way to put it. And there's one more player in this game that we haven't talked about much, the judiciary.
Ah, yes, the judiciary is a whole other can of worms, isn't it? From what I've been reading, the judiciary in Turkey has become a pretty controversial issue lately. There have been a lot of arrests of people who've spoken out against Erdogan, journalists, activists, opposition politicians. It's making people wonder whether the courts are really independent or just another tool in Erdogan's political toolbox.
It's a legitimate concern, for sure. The judiciary has become increasingly politicized under Erdogan's rule, and there's a growing perception that the courts are no longer impartial, that they're more interested in protecting the government than upholding the law.
So it's not just about winning elections anymore. It's about controlling the institutions that underpin the entire system.
Right. If you control the courts, you can control the narrative, silence your critics, and shape the political landscape to your advantage.
It's a classic authoritarian playbook. Consolidate power, control the media, and use the courts to silence any opposition.
And there are a couple of high-profile cases that have really brought this issue to the forefront. One involves Sem Adun, a young and charismatic CHP leader who was recently arrested on what many see as trumped-up charges.
Seriously. They're going after the up-and-coming generation of opposition leaders now. That's pretty bold, even for Erdogan.
It's a clear message, right? Don't even think about challenging the established order. And then there's the case of Ekrem Imamoglu, the mayor of Istanbul. Remember him? The guy who pulled off that shock and upset victory against Erdogan's hand-picked candidate a few years back.
Oh yeah, Imamoglu. He's become a real symbol of hope for the opposition, a potential challenger to Erdogan on the national stage. What's going on with him?
Well, he's currently under investigation for some alleged irregularities during his time as mayor. The charges are pretty vague, and the timing's awfully suspicious right in the middle of this whole election drama.
It seems a little too convenient for Erdogan, doesn't it? It's like they're trying to take out a major rival through legal means, rather than face him at the ballot box.
That's exactly what the opposition's accusing Erdogan of doing. They're saying these investigations are politically motivated, designed to damage Imamoglu's reputation, and derail his potential presidential ambitions.
It's a risky move for Erdogan, though, isn't it? This kind of thing could backfire. If people see it as a blatant abuse of power, it could actually energize the opposition and make Imamoglu a martyr, a symbol of resistance against Erdogan's authoritarian rule.
It's a high-stakes gamble, that's for sure, Erdogan's betting, that he can control the narrative, that he can convince enough people that these investigations are legitimate. But it could further erode public trust in the judiciary, which is already pretty low.
This is getting more and more intense by the minute. It's pretty clear that what's happened in Turkey isn't just some internal political squabble. The stakes are way higher than that. We're talking about the future of democracy in a country that's strategically vital, a bridge between East and West, a key player in a region that's already incredibly volatile.
You're absolutely right. What happens in Turkey doesn't stay in Turkey. It has ripple effects throughout the region and beyond.
So let's connect the dots here. What are the international implications of this whole Turkish political drama? What does it mean for the rest of the world?
Well, one area where we're already seeing the impact is in the Eastern Mediterranean. Erdogan's been flexing Turkey's military muscles, asserting its claims to offshore energy resources, and that's causing some serious friction with Greece, Cyprus, and the European Union.
Right. There have been some pretty tense naval standoffs, with warships from different countries practically playing chicken out there. It's a powder keg just waiting to explode.
It's a dangerous game of brinkmanship, and it's adding fuel to the fire in a region that's already on edge. And then there's the whole issue of Syria and the millions of Syrian refugees that Turkey's hosting.
Right. Turkey's been on the front lines of the Syrian refugee crisis, taking in more refugees than any other country in the world.
And Erdogan's policies on Syria, including his military incursions into the country, are having a major impact on the region's stability.
And it's straining Turkey's relationship with the West, too, right? The U.S. and Europe haven't exactly been thrilled with some of Erdogan's actions in Syria, especially his military operations against Kurdish groups that have been allied with the West in the fight against ISIS.
Definitely. It's created a lot of tension and mistrust.
So Turkey's finding itself increasingly isolated on the world stage, at odds with its traditional allies, and cozying up to countries like Russia and Iran. It's a far cry from the Turkey that was once seen as a model of democratic development in the Muslim world, a bridge between East and West.
It's been a pretty dramatic shift, and it's making a lot of people nervous, both inside and outside Turkey.
Okay, let's put on our futurologist hats for a minute. What are the possible futures for Turkey? What happens if Erdogan manages to pull off another victory?
Well, if Erdogan wins another term, it'll likely mean more of the same, a continuation of his current policies, both at home and abroad. He'd probably double down on his assertive foreign policy, his economic program, his efforts to consolidate power.
So more of the same, but maybe even more intense?
Exactly. He might feel emboldened by another victory, more confident in his ability to defy his critics and do things his way.
But surely another Erdogan victory wouldn't exactly be met with silence, right? Wouldn't it lead to even more pushback from the opposition, more scrutiny from the international community, more tension on the streets?
Oh, absolutely. The opposition wouldn't just roll over and accept defeat. They'd likely become even more vocal in their criticism, and the international community might respond with more sanctions or other measures to express their disapproval.
It's a scenario that could lead to even more polarization within Turkey, increased instability in the region, and potentially even more conflict.
Okay, so that's one possible future. Let's flip the script. What happens if the opposition manages to pull off a victory? What would a change of leadership mean for Turkey?
That would be a seismic shift, a real turning point in Turkish politics. It would mark the end of an era, the first time in 2 decades that someone other than Erdogan would be at the helm. It'd be a historic moment, no doubt about it, but it would also come with a lot of uncertainty. Would the opposition be able to deliver on its promises? Could they really unite the country and set it on a new course?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? They've pledged to undo a lot of the changes that Erdogan made, particularly those constitutional changes that concentrated so much power in the presidency.
They want to go back to a more balanced system, one with stronger checks and balances, where power is more evenly distributed.
Exactly. They want to restore a more parliamentary system where the parliament has a more meaningful role in decision-making.
It's a noble goal, but it wouldn't be easy, would it? They'd face resistance from Erdogan's supporters, and they'd have to navigate a complex and often messy political landscape.
It wouldn't be a quick fix, that's for sure. It'd be a long and winding road, but it could potentially lead to a more democratic, more pluralistic Turkey.
And what about the economy? How would they tackle those issues? The inflation, the currency problems, the general sense of economic unease.
Well, they've been pretty critical of Erdogan's economic policies, so it's safe to say they'd take a different approach.
What would that look like?
They've talked about the need for greater fiscal discipline, structural reforms, rebuilding trust with international investors, basically, a more orthodox approach to economic management.
A shift away from Erdogan's unorthodox policies, which some economists say have contributed to the current economic woes.
Exactly. They'd likely try to restore confidence in the Turkish economy, both domestically and internationally.
That's a tall order, though, given the current state of things.
No doubt about it. It'd require some tough choices, some painful adjustments, and there'd be no quick fixes.
And what about Turkey's role in the world? Would we see a change in foreign policy under a new leadership?
Well, that's one of the big unknowns. It's hard to say for sure, but it's likely that they'd try to repair some of the damage that's been done to Turkey's relationships with the West.
So, a less confrontational approach, a move away from that go-it-alone strongman style that Erdogan's favored in recent years.
Exactly. They might try to position Turkey as a more reliable and predictable partner, a bridge between East and West, rather than a source of tension and instability.
That'd be a welcome change for a lot of folks in the West, but it would also require Turkey to make some concessions, to moderate its ambitions, to play by the rules of the international game.
It's a delicate balancing act, for sure, but it's not impossible. Turkey's a pragmatic country. It's always been good at adapting to changing circumstances.
Okay, so we've got these two very different potential outcomes. Erdogan wins, and we see more of the same, with all the risks and uncertainties that come with it. Or the opposition wins, and we see a course correction, a move towards a more democratic and cooperative Turkey, but with a long and difficult road ahead.
And there's always that third possibility, the one that nobody really wants to talk about.
You're talking about a stalemate, a situation where neither side can claim a clear victory, where the political system gets bogged down in gridlock and uncertainty.
Exactly. What happens if this whole constitutional crisis just drags on and on? What if the election results are disputed, or if neither side can form a stable government?
That's a scary thought. It could lead to prolonged political instability, even social unrest.
It's a recipe for chaos, both domestically and internationally. A politically unstable Turkey would be a nightmare for the region, a source of uncertainty and anxiety for its neighbors, a breeding ground for extremism and conflict.
Okay, so we've got three possible scenarios. Erdogan wins, the opposition wins, or we get a stalemate. None of them are ideal. Each comes with its own set of challenges and risks. But one thing's for sure. The stakes are incredibly high, not just for Turkey, but for the entire world.
It's a reminder that we're all interconnected, that events in one part of the world can have far-reaching consequences. And it's a reminder that democracy is a precious and fragile thing, something we can't take for granted.
And it's a reminder that we can't just sit back and watch from the sidelines. We all have a role to play in defending democracy, in promoting peace and stability, in building a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexity of global events, to think that our individual actions don't really matter, but that's simply not true. Every voice counts, every act of courage, every effort to build bridges instead of walls.
Well said. So we've thrown a lot of information at you in this deep dive. We've talked about the constitutional crisis, Erdogan's strategies, the opposition's challenges, the role of the judiciary, and the international implications of this whole power struggle. It's a complex situation, but hopefully we've shed some light on the key players and the potential outcomes.
And hopefully we've given you some food for thought, some new perspectives on this critical election and its global significance.
Now we want to hear from you, our listeners. You've heard the arguments, you've weighed the evidence, you've considered the possibilities. Now it's time for you to draw your own conclusions. Given what we've discussed, what do you think is the most likely scenario to play out in Turkey? Will Erdogan manage to hold on to power, or will the opposition usher in a new era? Or will Turkey find itself stuck in a political quagmire, a stalemate that benefits no one?
And maybe even more importantly, what do you think the consequences of each scenario would be, not just for Turkey, but for the region and the world as a whole? What are the implications for democracy, for stability, for global security?
These aren't easy questions to answer, but they're questions we all need to be grappling with. Turkey's fate is intertwined with our own in ways we might not always realize. What happens in Ankara has ripple effects in Washington, Brussels, Moscow, Beijing, you name it.
It's a reminder that we live in an interconnected world where events in one corner of the globe can have profound implications for the rest of us. It also highlights the fact that we can't afford to be complacent, that we need to stay informed, engaged, and involved in these critical conversations.
We're all part of this unfolding drama, whether we realize it or not, and the choices we make, the actions we take, can make a difference. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the heart of Turkish politics, we encourage you to continue exploring these issues, to delve deeper, to challenge your own assumptions, to engage in thoughtful dialogue with others.
The future of Turkey is still being written, and it's a story that we'll all be watching very closely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Turkish politics, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of global events.